There are two types of people in the world, those who love Tetris, and those who really love Tetris. And the latest game in the now 40-year-old series, Tetris Forever, is aimed squarely at that latter group. As Tetris Forever is less a game, though it does have 18 of them included, and more of an interactive history lesson through 4 decades of Tetris. Split up across 5 chapters in one pretty slick menu, Tetris Forever takes you from the series' humble roots as the brainchild of just one really smart guy, up through the crazy battles over the game's licensing rights, which of course involved Nintendo, and onward across its continued success over the next several decades. And it doesn't just lay it out in text, but through an interactive timeline that's engaging to explore thanks to a ton of images, interactive 3D models, videos, brand new interviews with pivotal figures like creator Alexei Pajitnov, businessman Hank Rogers, and a few others. And perhaps most interestingly, it makes history playable too, by including multiple versions of Tetris and Tetris adjacent games as part of the history lesson. Outside of maybe the recent Tetris movie, which by the way they talk about here too, Tetris's history has never been so thorough or accessible, and this one's version of history is certainly the more accurate of the two. Spoiler alert, that car chase with the KGB never actually happened. Sorry, but what actually did happen is just as interesting, and I learned plenty of things that were new to me. Such as how the Tetris name itself came about as a portmanteau of tetra, the Greek prefix for 4, given the nature of the Tetris shapes, and tennis, simply because it was Alexei's favorite sport. But I will say that the presentation can be a little dry at times, with a lot of talking heads and not much in the way of editing, which occasionally made it a battle to hold my interest for long periods. Because despite the countless lengthy interviews and overall solid presentation, it's all very matter of fact, and doesn't quite enrapture the same way a well-made documentary can. But then again, I've never been able to play a documentary before either, and I'm not going to lie. It was pretty damn cool being able to instantly play a faithful recreation of the very first Tetris game in all of its neon green glory, even if the lack of a soft drop nearly killed me. Though thanks to the accompanying material, you'll learn the fascinating reason why it had to be that way. I also had no idea until now that the earlier versions of Tetris didn't even track the amount of lines that you cleared, instead only awarding points based on how soon you dropped each piece, which is freaking wild to me. Yet even in its most primitive forms, it's clear why Tetris still endures to this day. It's fun no matter how you play it, which I discovered across the 13 playable classic variations of Tetris available here that span the years between 1984 and 1989, even if I'm not the biggest fan of the Tetris Attack / Bombless variants. And of course, it should go without saying that there's a lot of overlap between those 13 games, given that they're all Tetris at their core, making for little reason to revisit most of them outside of their historic roles. Though I did at least find Tetris Battle Gaiden to stand out mechanically thanks to its competitive nature and unique magic attacks, especially as it's never been released outside of Japan until now. There's also a handful of non-Tetris games included too, given their historical significance, including a version of Go for the Famicom due to its role in helping to establish a relationship with Nintendo, along with 3 freaking versions of Hatris, which is clear proof that even the best of us can make mistakes, 3 times over, as these games are total stinkers. Sorry, not sorry. In any case, for as impressive as the collection of games here is, it's also far from all-encompassing, which would probably be an unfair expectation considering there's what, over 200 official versions across its 40-year history? Are you kidding me? I can only imagine the licensing nightmare that would have been. But even within the 15-year span of playable games here, it's still missing some pretty notable versions, like the NES and Game Boy versions of Tetris. You know, the 2 that made the game a mega hit, which again is likely due for licensing reasons. Which is probably why Super Bombless DX on the Game Boy Color is made playable here on the handheld Power Color? Yeah, those pesky Tetris licensing rights strike again. Regardless, I would have loved an even more eclectic mix of Tetris experiences to have been included, such as the 3D spin-off Weltris, which I really wanted to try after seeing Alexei show it off in the new interviews. But even excusing the missing playable games, I was hoping that Tetris Forever would at least offer a more comprehensive overview of the countless games released in the decades since Tetris first blew up. But outside of a handful of exceptions, like a very brief overview of the Dreamcast Online versions, or this absolutely amazing one shaped like a McDonald's Chicken McNugget, it's pretty clear that Tetris Forever is a lot more interested in the earlier days than it is with anything beyond the Game Boy and NES era. Which probably explains why it takes 3 chapters to cover the first 15 years, while the next 30 years are packed into the final 2. But there is one more fun playable element to Tetris Forever, and that's a brand new version of the game called Tetris Time Warp. Although the core gameplay is the same you already know and love, you'll occasionally be warped to Tetris' distant past to take on classic challenges for bonus points. Or alternatively, as a result of being attacked by a friend in multiplayer, which is sadly local only. But hey, at least it supports up to 4 players. Outside of the plain aesthetic, I found Tetris Time Warp to be a pretty fun and novel way of experiencing a handful of Tetris eras within a self-contained experience. And yeah, this is the one place where you can play something that looks like the original Game Boy game. But even though Time Warp's an interesting idea, it's not quite good enough to make it my preferred way of playing Tetris. And that basically holds true for every game here, as most of the included Tetris variants offer little, if anything, that almost any modern version of Tetris doesn't. Again, outside of that Gaia version. Which obviously is kind of the point, as the more primitive graphics, controls, and features are intended to complement the history being told, rather than being the stars themselves. Which is why I said at the very beginning that this game is really geared toward those who really love Tetris, or at least have a deep appreciation for gaming history. Because if you fall within either group, Tetris Forever does a fantastic job of immersing you in Tetris history. Between the new lengthy interviews, playable games, and tons of other media to explore, this is a fantastic companion for anyone who's at least been interested in Tetris history. And it might just be the perfect piece for your library, as it might teach even the most knowledgeable of fans a new thing or two. And speaking as not just a Tetris fan, but a Nintendo fan as well, I really enjoyed some of the behind the scenes details. And not just because I used to work in that building, in that very office! But if you're only looking for your next Tetris gameplay fix, you should almost certainly look elsewhere, given that the gameplay definitely plays second fiddle to the history lesson. As for me, as one who merely loves Tetris, instead of really loving Tetris, I give Tetris Forever a 7 out of 10. And with that, thank you for watching our review of Tetris Forever. If you enjoyed this, click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for tons more from me. And with that, we'll catch you later. Bye everyone!